Hey guys, we're on chapter 6 this week titled Jails, Way Stations Along the Justice Highway. A few things that I want you to understand and retain from this chapter are the brief history of the development of jails. Also, know what first, second, and third generation jails are and how they differ in design and inmate management. Know the difference in a jail and a prison. Know the purpose of jails. Understand bail release options, and to know a little about what privatization is, mostly at prisons. Uh, it's believed that King Henry II of England ordered the first jail to be built in 1166, and the purpose of that jail was to detain offenders until they could be brought before the court, tried, and sentences. Although there have been some additional duties that fall on jails, basically they remain the same. A jail is used to hold uh, a defendant until that defendant is sentenced and sent to prison. It's not meant for long-term housing of an inmate. For example, if a judge holds a defendant in contempt of court, they are jailed until the trial is complete for the original charge or sentence for the additional violation of law, which would be contempt of court. Jails are meant to be short term incarceration facilities. I want you to take away from this chapter, I want you to understand that. Jails are meant to be short term incarceration facilities. Who's in charge of jails in the United States? For the most part, are in charge. Sheriffs are the keeper of jails. City police departments may have a holding cell to simply hold until transported to a county jail, but sheriffs are in charge of jails throughout the country. It's probably one of their biggest responsibilities and expenses if you talk to sheriffs. It's a huge responsibility that they have to take care of. And their biggest part of their budget goes to take care of inmates in a jail. Again, I want you to remember inmates are housed in county jails until sentencing is complete, and then they are sent to a state or federal prison to complete the sentence imposed on them by the judge. Occasionally, a federal agency will ask a sheriff to hold a defendant, suspect, or even an inmate for a different reason, but not often. Uh, Many of the questions on the quiz are about bail release options. So let's discuss a few of those. And they're a little bit, if you're not familiar with this, with with the bail system, it gets complicated. The United States leads the world in the number of pre-trial detainees, which is the defendants who are held in jail prior to their trial on criminal charges because no bail is posted or bail is denied. So what that comes to the question, what is bail? Bail is a written obligation with or without collateral security given to a court to guarantee the appearance of that person before the court. Uh, a person may be released after their arrest in several ways before the court date, and those ways are a cash bond, a deposit bond, a property bond, or a bail bond. There are also release options that don't involve money, and those are release on your own recognizances, conditional releases, release to a pretrial service, and an unsecured bond. A cash bond is simply paying the cash bond and then being released. So if you've got a $100,000 bond for something, that person pays the $100,000 and they're released. A deposit bond is usually paying a percentage of the bail, usually 10%. And the whole time I was in police work, I didn't see that very often. Now we'll get to a bail bond here in a second. This is what you'll see a lot, but I didn't see a deposit bond used very often. A property bond, and I saw this used quite a bit. A property bond is submitting a deed to a land or a house where the court will keep a lien on that property if the defendant doesn't show up for court. And a bail bond is a non-refundable fee, usually 10% paid to a for-profit bail bonding company that puts up the money for a defendant. So in a case where someone gets a DUI and the bond is $1,000, uh, and they don't have the $1,000 to put up, they would call a bail bonding company. The bail bonding company would come up, and typically it'd be $100 for $1,000 would be the bond. So 10% of that's $100. They would pay the bail bonding company $100, which is a non-refundable fee. That bail bonding company keeps that $100, and in exchange, hoping that this defendant or the suspect shows up on their court date, because they put the $1,000 up, and they would lose the $1,000 if that person doesn't show up for court. Uh, One example of a release option that doesn't involve money is an unsecured bond, and it simply makes the person liable for a fee if they miss a court hearing. Another is a conditional release, and it's when a suspect is released under specific terms. Let's discuss on that. And again, I try to touch on some things that are on your quiz also. So make sure you listen to the lecture before you take your quiz, because conditional release is on there, I think, and I remember that now as I'm going over it. So I hope that's enough to kind of get you started. And I think after you read the chapter and look over the PowerPoint and everything, I think those things that we just talked about will help a lot. So now I want to talk a little bit about first, second, and third generation jails. And there are some questions on your quiz about this also. So make sure you listen the best you can and go over it again if you want to listen again. First generation jails were built in linear designs that date back to the 18th century. Second generation jails emerged in the 1960s to replace old rundown linear jails and to provide officers the opportunity to observe as much of the housing area as possible from a single vantage point. So think of this as a jail in which the staff remains in a secure control booth surrounded by inmate housing areas that are called pods. And third generation jails began being built in 1974 when the Federal Bureau of Prisons opened 3 metropolitan correctional centers in 3 cities: New York, Chicago, and San Diego. These were also known as direct supervision jails. These jails were designed where inmates were housed in small groups staffed 24 hours a day by specially trained officers. Officers interact with inmates to help change behavior. And bars and metal doors were absent, reducing noise and dehumanization. So if you look at the housing unit design, it would be considered podular, but in a sense where they were going more. I don't know how successful these was, and I want to do a little research on this. It was less of a jail and more of humanization of the inmates there. And I don't know if these were used. I need to look over this again for people with different crimes, with more violent crimes. I doubt that. So hopefully we've covered most of the objectives, and I hope this will help you understand better while you study. Let me know if you need any help, and have a great week. And always, if you need an immediate answer, text me. If you don't require an immediate answer, email me or leave a message in any way. But usually I try to respond. Even on a weekend, you can text me. I check my emails on Monday through Friday, and I try to check them on the weekends, but I usually get right back to you Monday through Friday. But again, don't hesitate to text me either or call me. Thanks. Have a great week.